All the bad kids are here in the elevator. Margot couldn't believe her eyes when she entered the elevator. It was the most ordinary elevator in Target, but the reflection staring back at her was not. It wasn't the Margot who had been forced to leave home, nor the one who wore oversized t-shirts and wiped tears with chubby fingers. This was a slim, bright Margot in a blue dress. She lifted her arms to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. Her arms were truly slender. All that fat had somehow been trimmed away. After dropping out of school due to depression, Margot had never laughed as she did now. She looked down and saw that her legs were thin and straight. The soft glow from her satin hem reflected on her skin, making it look fair and smooth. If she had looked like this back in school, how many girls would have crowded around to befriend her? Most importantly, her parents would have loved her more. They wouldn't have screamed about how terrible she looked anymore. They would have happily introduced her to family friends. Most visitors thought the Kwans had only one daughter, the flawless straight A, student Lynn. Margot had always been hidden too fat, too stupid, too unworthy. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor. Margot saw her family outside. They were talking and smiling as usual. Her parents were probably discussing dinner. Lynn was holding a game console. Lynn was allowed to play video games, but Margot had been forbidden from reading novels as she grew up. Of course, she wasn't good enough for leisure. For a fleeting second, she thought of Lee, the neighbor girl who had vanished from school after a breakdown. Her parents' warning still echoed. Don't end up like her. But now, everything had changed. Margot was pretty and confident enough to be a Kwan. She would never end up like that forgotten neighbor. She stepped out of the elevator. Her mum saw her and rushed to her. She had been told to stay in the car, but she had every right to come out. She smiled at her mum, then at her dad. He looked furious, but surely he would smile back once he got a good look at his now impressive daughter. Lynn ran over to her too. What a family reunion. Mum hugged her and asked what she wanted for supper. Margot had been fed only cucumbers for a month now. She was being offered choices like beef and chicken. She must look marvelous. Dad and Lynn didn't say anything, which meant they were so impressed by her new appearance that they were speechless. If entering the elevator once could make such a difference, why not enter twice, 3 times, or even more? I want to go back to that elevator, she said. Confused looks met her words, but she didn't care. She had discovered magic. Margot swore she would hide the secret from Lynn forever. The parent's pet was already successful enough. I want to go to that elevator, she repeated. Dad began to look angry. He was always so cynical. He grabbed her arm and muttered in her ear, telling her to shut up. But she would never be hidden again. I want to go to the elevator. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Her family was gone. Everyone was staring at her, and she knew they were startled by her glowing satin dress. She strode back to the elevator with the poise of Naomi Campbell, showered by admiring glances. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Lynn staring, still holding that stupid game console. The thought of how jealous Lynn must be made Margot smile again. The elevator was slightly different this time. There were no buttons on the wall, and all the walls had turned into mirrors. Margot looked at the 4 other Margots reflected around her. Not only was she attractive in fine dresses, but one held a Harvard diploma. Another was winning cases in court. Being an attorney was Lynn's dream, and their parents' expectation. The 4th Margot was married to a handsome white man. He must have a trust fund, she thought. I'm winning everything. The elevator moved smoothly. Margot didn't know which direction it was heading, but it didn't matter anymore. The handsome man started speaking sweetly to her. She saw herself buying her parents a huge loft in central Manhattan. She was surrounded by flowers at her wedding. She had everything here. Why bother thinking? But then she noticed something else. The man's lips didn't move. He had no lips. Flat skin where a mouth should be smooth, polished, obscene. Margot spun toward the mirrors. Laughter rattled inside the glass, but every version of her was lipless, grinning without mouths, eyes fixed and hollow. She touched her own face with trembling hands. Her eyebrows were twitching, tears streamed down her face, and where her lips should have been, there was only smooth skin. Something was gone. Something essential. She couldn't scream because there was nowhere for the scream to come out. The mirrors around her began to blur. The figures weren't just losing their mouths, they were losing their noses, eyes and ears too. Margot's eyes were stabbed by the flashing lights of the merging reflections, and she began to feel suffocated. Her nose was melting. The elevator is eating me. The sentence suddenly popped into her mind. The verb eating cut through her dizziness like an axe. The elevator had seduced her by showing what her life could be just to devour her. Not knowing what else to do, she began punching the mirrors around her. The figures swirled each time she struck, but returned to normal instantly. Her eyelids were melting. She punched harder and harder. Then she felt cracks form in the mirror. It was working. She punched over and over, feeling warm streams of blood run down her fist. She could see again, then breathe, and finally she could let out a scream. She was still in an elevator, but now it was on the first floor, and there were no mirrors. The door opened slowly. She saw her parents. They rushed to her and hugged her tightly. It was dark inside Target. She must have been stuck in the elevator for more than 10 hours. At least her parents had waited. But then they let go and pushed her. They were pushing her back into the elevator. What? I can't go back there, she cried, resisting with all her strength. She was already exhausted from that elevator. You're going back to the elevator? Mom smiled. You were happy there, weren't you? We were happy, Dad said, pushing her harder. She fell onto the floor of the elevator. Her parents waited outside until the doors closed. She climbed up and realized she was surrounded by mirrors again. This time, though, the glass no longer reflected Margot alone. A blurry figure hovered in the mirror, Lee, her neighbor. Margot froze. Lee, who had vanished from school, who her parents once used as a warning, don't end up like her. But she was here in the elevator, just like Margot. Lee smiled. Her figure disappeared and was replaced by a Margot dressed in a linen suit. The elevator began to move, smooth and silent, heading nowhere.